Master mode, Vault of Glass, it's here. It's tough. I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to let you know right now that Elitist Datto is going to show up at some point during the first half of the video. Just prepare for that. First, we're going to talk about the gameplay portion of Master Mode. The raid itself, we're going to talk about loot in the second half. The raid does not have any mechanical changes. Not that I was anticipating any to happen, but I just wanted to make that known. In Master, the raid is 1350 all the time. There are more champions spawning in, and there are modifiers. This first week wasn't anything crazy. It was chaff. I don't know if anything's going to change on that front. Match games also enabled. A bunch of other mods, but revives work as they normally do in a raid. This means that with enough artifact levels, you can match the difficulty of the raid, but very few people will be able to get plus 30 on their artifact in a season. That means that most people who enter the raid will be underleveled, which is kind of the point. The Master Mode pretty closely reflects the Master Nightfall experience, although the Master Nightfall is 1340, not 1350. The Nightfall being easier than the raid makes sense to me, even if most things are even otherwise. I thought the difficulty of the raid was pretty fair and met my expectations. I was 13 levels underneath, which is where I imagine most people who are capable of actually attempting the raid will be. About 10 to 15 levels underneath, aka around GM Nightfall levels. This kind of content is designed for people who chase GM Nightfalls and thus are able to get to those levels by this time. If you aren't that kind of player or don't do that kind of content, well, I don't think this was designed for you in the first place. I know that might be tough to hear, but just because a piece of content is in the game does not mean you're guaranteed to beat it or have it be an easy or comfortable experience. Things hurt in the raid. I wasn't getting one shot by everything like a lot of people are claiming, except for, maybe a big old punch to the face by an Overload Minotaur, but things still definitely hurt, and I would highly suggest speccing for defense on your armor. This means concussive dampener, solar and or void damage reduction, protective light, things like that. Stasis is going to be really helpful in the raid. I highly recommend it for more than half of the encounters in there. Otherwise, this matched my vision of what I thought the raid was going to be like on Master Mode. Let's talk levels. Master VOG is 1350. I imagine they didn't make it the same level as Master Nightfall because the raid is just naturally supposed to be more challenging content, and because making it 1340 would have meant that the people this content is designed for, which I believe to be GM Nightfall players, would have already been around that level, making it not nearly as much of a challenge. I'm willing to bet Bungie wants you to be around 10 to 15 levels underneath. You need to understand that this is supposed to be a challenge for the people who are already doing some of the most challenging things in the game. To match GM Nightfall difficulty in terms of combat in the raid, you need to be 1325, which is 25 levels below 1350. If you are going in at a lower level than 1325, you're either a gamer or I think you're wasting your time. Contest mode is a permanent 20 levels above you regardless of whatever level you are. So if you're 1300, everything scales to 1320. So Bungie could have went with this route, making it so everyone was locked at 20 levels underneath all of the enemies permanently. With this scaling, this makes it accessible to everyone to try on day one no matter what, but it also makes it so it never gets easier. I've heard all the complaints about contest mode being too difficult on day one, but allowing people to practice over time might be a bit more acceptable than only that 24-hour period. Instead, they made it 1350 locked, meaning if you're not at 1330 or higher, you're at a disadvantage compared to contest mode. But Master Mode gives you the ability to make it easier by gaining levels, which I don't think is the worst concept considering that all other content in the game works this way, save for Grandmaster Nightfalls. Go look at Master Nightfalls as an example. I think both methods have their merits. Master Mode enables people to say, okay, if I grind out a few more levels, come back next month, we got a better chance, putting the control back to the player. The issue here is that leveling in and of itself is inherently not the most fun experience, with RNG potentially blocking you from leveling up gear-wise, and with artifact leveling just being a grind bounties until you're high enough experience if you're not a very active player doing all the seasonal challenges. As a concept, it's not a bad idea to have things get easier as you get better gear and more levels. This encourages players to keep grinding. This is supposed to be very challenging combat, and it is designed with a hardcore player in mind. It shouldn't easily be cleared, and potentially shouldn't be easily accessed. Sometimes hardcore content is locked behind hardcore requirements to even enter. Is that a bad thing? As a concept, no, not necessarily. Maybe a developer of a game wants a certain level of gameplay mastery before you can gain access to an end game piece of content. In Destiny, unfortunately, this might translate to power levels. But Bungie has continued to make everything in the game very accessible, so when players are finally hit with something that takes more time or effort to unlock or complete, well, they don't like that because it's not the norm. I would not have a problem with Master VOG if it was a contest mode thing when it comes to difficulty and gameplay, for the record. I would not have a problem with it being more accessible as long as the difficulty remains the same. When the main way to get access isn't fun to do, though, well, I can sympathize with that frustration. We all know that leveling is not exactly Destiny's strong suit, and I could talk about it for hours. All that being said, regardless of whatever method Bungie chose, I'm still gonna have to hear people throw around the phrase artificial difficulty, so at the end of the day, does it even really matter? Let's talk about our old friend, artificial difficulty, shall we? It's like my favorite of the buzzwords and the phrases, right up there with like, I don't know. Name your favorite Destiny buzzword in the comments. Delta scaling, I don't know. Artificial difficulty, raising the health bars, raising the damage. Bungie has already said that they're not going to mess with mechanics, and while that saddens me, as I like when they do that, I knew not to expect it. The goal of Master, in terms of difficulty, I imagine, is to make it so you can't face roll it. At least 99% of groups are not going to be able to face roll it. And I imagine that's what a lot of groups tried to do. They tried to play it like a normal raid. No, not everything's one-shotting you, and if they are, you're either playing poorly and your positioning's bad, or you're like 13, 15 power. Things hurt, yes, but let's not exaggerate too much here. You need to play differently. You need patience, you need coordination, you need to use cover, you need to be dipping in and out, you need to be using your abilities in a smarter way, you need to be doing more than you usually do. And cranking up health and damage is a method of changing how you have to play the game. Again, this is supposed to be a combat challenge for people who are currently doing the most challenging things in the game. If you're not already doing that kind of content, it's gonna be really effing hard. Sometimes, unfortunately, and I know you don't want to hear this, get good is the answer. Learning how to deal with champions in an intense combat situation is a get good scenario. There's not really many ways around it. You need to learn how to coordinate. The game just rarely challenges you in that way. It's not designed to be played the same way as other content. People don't like jiggle peeking around corners to kill stuff. It's very lethal, I get it. But you also need ways to threaten the player, which brings us smoothly to the next paragraph. Additional mechanics, without any additional combat challenge, maybe throws a wrench in the raid for a couple of days, and then it just kind of becomes a face roll again. And this is not supposed to be face roll content. It's just not. It's like when people say they want more enemies to spawn in as opposed to higher health or harder hitting ones. More enemies, I don't think, is going to create the difficulty most people are imagining it will when weapons like Trinity Ghoul and Huckleberry exist. It would be way more fun. I'll totally give you that. Nothing more fun than just mowing down waves of enemies with like Huckleberry, Trinity Ghoul, whatever. But I don't think it would be harder unless you were surrounded to the point where you had to take cover and jiggle peek out of fear of being absolutely mauled. Let's not forget Warmind cells obliterating entire rooms either. With no risk of death, with no risk of failure, there is no challenge. And I don't think more ads would challenge people as much as people think that it would, even if it would be more fun. So let's go back to mechanics. There are some encounters that feature an abundance of mechanics to generate difficulty. And guess what? People don't like that either. And they say it's too hard. You're cheesing past Riven mechanics. You're one-orbing Golgoroth. You hate Spire of Stars. Yes, I'm generalizing, I know. So you either introduce so many mechanics to make it harder that people hate it and don't find it fun, or you don't do enough and it's still a face roll. Hitting that line of perfection is very difficult. Look at how many people avoid combat whenever humanly possible. I know you all are standing on that back wall during Atheon on normal mode. No wonder a goblin that takes 2 extra shots to kill scares people. Master mode is Bungie asking you to fight difficult enemies because that is how they can increase difficulty in this game in a consistent and reliable and perhaps balanced way. I get that people don't like champions. I don't think they're a big deal, but when the seasonal weapons to stun champions are then, you know, I get it. It is just one way to get people to play with certain loadouts and change things up season over season, and it's a way to actually threaten our insane power in the form of champions, but I don't know. I don't know what you put in their place. If you take them out of the game, maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's a generic, stunnable, threatening target. I don't know, but I do know that it's a conversation for another video, along with make enemies have better AI, which is another... I'm not even going to start. This one's already going super long. I'm just tired of hearing, give us more mechanics, and then Bungie gives us a mechanic-heavy fight, and then people are like, oh, that's too many, let's figure out how to avoid all of those. And then if they can't avoid them, like Valka Or, people are like, this fight sucks. There's too many mechanics. Worst of all, I hate that Bungie still has not fixed Riven cheese, but Riven's kind of a meme at this point anyway, so who cares? Let's talk fun factor. Since I know people are going to bring that up, it's not fun fighting against enemies that take 15,000 shots to kill. Are we allowed to be challenged in a game for the sake of the challenge, even if it's not the most fun thing? I think the answer depends on how you feel about being challenged in a video game, because some people find the very concept of being challenged in an activity or a game fun, regardless if the actual thing that you are doing is fun. I thought this was fun because it challenged me in a way that I only get to experience maybe about once per year. This mode does not care if you don't think it's fun. It doesn't care. I enjoy challenge even if sometimes it means I gotta sit behind a rock for 15 minutes because we're so rarely truly challenged in this game, and I like being able to beat the hardest things in a game. I enjoy going onto hard mode because I like testing myself. Other people, they don't enjoy that kind of stuff, and that's okay. And while I think the ultimate goal should be that the challenge you are trying to complete is fun, for the purposes of Master Mode, if what you need to do is jiggle peek behind a rock because you're 27 levels underneath, then that's what you gotta do to get it done. The Overload Minotaur running at you doesn't care about your light level. This content is not meant to appeal to everyone. Maybe it should, I don't know, but not everything is gonna be appealing to everyone, and that's okay. It should maybe be more accessible than doable or appealing to everyone though. Difficulty in Destiny is another hotly debated topic that we could speak for hours about. I'm going to spare you for now because otherwise we're just going to be going forever. Essentially, if you are not GM Nightfall ready or we're not planning on becoming GM Nightfall ready, then I don't think entering Vault of Glass on Master will be a fruitful endeavor. Not being GM ready means you will be more than 15 levels under the raid, and while that is not as bad as 25 levels like the GM, it's still a raid setting and things are very deadly. I would not recommend entering Master VOG below 1330 unless you really know what you're doing or you're just wanting to give it the old college try. I've seen and heard feedback that in order to feel comfortable taking on this challenge that you should be at least plus 20 on your artifact, which isn't reasonable for most people to obtain. I'm at plus 17 right now. The highest I've ever gotten on a pass is around plus 20, maybe plus 21. But again, I would argue that this challenge shouldn't be about feeling comfortable. Not everything in the game should be comfortable or should be easy. Some things should be uncomfortable. They should make you have to get out of your comfort zone and into tough positions in order to succeed. The way Bungie goes about actually executing on that is obviously up for debate. Do I think this will scale up like Master Nightfalls do season over season or stay at 1350 permanently? I'm not sure. I don't know how Bungie wants to handle it. If it stays at 1350 forever, the next season it'll be much easier to tackle for the majority of the player base, losing a lot of its challenge in the process. If it scales up, it'll be untouchable until people start hitting GM levels of gear and power in the following season, but it will preserve its challenging element. I think it's a toss-up. I think it staying 1350 is maybe the slightest bit more likely so that more people can gain access to it, but I'm honestly not sure. I don't know how much Bungie wants to gatekeep this activity. Alright, get out of here. Get out of here, Elitist Datto. Get the hell out. Alright, he's gone. It's time to talk about loot. Time-lost loot. The looting experience in Master VOG. At this moment in time, I don't think there's a way that I can recommend actually doing Master Mode beyond getting your chimes for the title and maybe going for a time-lost Fatebringer if loot is your main goal. If things stay the way they are right now, I will most likely be doing one run per week, getting my title, and very rarely running it again. I realize this is a very stark contrast to how I felt about the gameplay portion, which I thought was fine. The raid itself, it's super challenging and good. I'm not going to do it again. I encourage just grabbing a challenge encounter checkpoint and getting your guns that way. I don't know. I guess it's more like I'll fill up on spoils, and then when I'm capped, I'll do a master run and dump everything on a good week. I don't know. Something like that. Time-lost weapons come from doing the challenge of the week on Master Mode. That is the only way to get a time-lost weapon. After you get it, you can buy more at the cache at the end of the raid for 25 spoils. Otherwise, it is one per week per character, assuming you do the challenge. Time-lost weapons come with 2 sets of main perks, with one of those sets being the curated role on the weapon, which you can find in the Collections tab. You get to select one of 2 perks in each column. For example, Hezen Vengeance will always have Overflow in perk slot 1 and Cluster Bombs on perk slot 2, and then having 2 other random perks. You pick one from A and you pick one from B. Time-lost Fatebringer will always have Explosive Payload in slot 1, Firefly in slot 2, on top of 2 random perks in slot 1 and slot 2, which is why I said you'll want to save your spoils for Fatebringer. And these weapons can also use Adept mods. Found Verdict comes with full auto and Vorpal. I guess that's more of a PvP selection. Vision of Confluence gets full auto and Zen Moment, aka the Destiny 1 role. You could probably pass on that one. All of these are technically the D1 versions of the weapons, or influenced by them. Praedits gets Feeding Frenzy and Firefly. That's probably going to be another skip unless you really like Firefly. And Corrective Measure gets Dynamic Sway Reduction and Firefly. Some people like Dynamic Sway Reduction and or Firefly on Corrective Measures. I don't personally. That's going to be a pass for me. The other weapon drops, the non-time lost, that you might get during a run are the exact same as normal mode. No extra perks, no nothing like that. The armor drops are specialized to a specific stat every week. In the first week, it is recovery. So any armor drops from the raid encounters or the cache at the end, very important to note that, will be recovery heavy. I mean heavy. 20 or more stats into recovery or whatever the selected stat of the week is. But total stat distribution otherwise is around what you would normally get from the raid. You can also get prisms and shards from the raid. Shards are considerably rarer. Thought that was a nice touch. Adept mods can also drop from the secret chests on rare occasion. I ran the master on my Titan. I got a terribly rolled time-lost weapon. I got no armor drops during any raid encounters, and then I bought 7 time-lost rockets, and all of them were not what I wanted. So effectively, the only thing I got out of the raid was the ship for completing the raid on Master Mode. Pretty not great feeling. But I've also gotten to do the raid enough that I don't really need to care that much about time-lost weapons since I have the roles that I want. Not everyone is in this position though, totally get it. Bungie has said that Adept weapons are hitting the mark that they wanted to hit. Better than an average gun, wanting to be, sort of chased, but not be overpowered. And I would agree that they are hitting that mark. I just don't think they do it for me. If I happen to get a good Adept weapon, then, great. But if I don't, I'm not the most inspired to try to go chase more of them. I mainly bought the rockets that I did because I was streaming at the time and I wanted to see what kind of roles to expect in the future. I think I'm also not the biggest fan of how the multiple perk options are done here. I think I'd rather have it all be completely random, but I get the, flavor of having the D1 variant roles. Kind of a nice touch. I think I'm just fatigued by weapon drops at this point as well. I don't go super nuts over weapon drops, but the fact that you get so few of the good ones when running this, it kind of sucks. Part of the appeal of Master Nightfall, or Lost Sectors, is that they are farmable and relatively quick at a chance for good loot like exotics or materials. Master VOG is not. Save for farming spoils at Templar and then running a Master Raid to get the cash at the end to try to hunt for a roll. Most people not doing that. I'm not doing that. One run this week was good enough for me. I will help my friends, and then when I'm full on spoils, I'll run it, I'll dump everything, and then I'll wait to fill back up. The fact that you only get one time-lost weapon per master run. The fact that if you miss a week of a weapon that you want, you gotta wait a month and a half for another one. Oh, tough. I both like and dislike the targeted armor drops. I can play when there are loot drops that I want and skip when I don't. But loot drops are already pretty accessible in terms of fine-tuning your stats. Mainly from the... oh my god. The Prismatic Recaster, that's what it is. You can already focus armor with an Umbral in that thing, and the drops are pretty good, and it only takes 2 overrides, maybe 3, 2 or 3, to get enough to make an engram, which is way more accessible than Master VOG. Now, the argument back is that well-rolled VOG armor allows you to use the VOG mods within your armor, and yes, that is an advantage. I don't know a single person using the VOG mods. Maybe with Master Mode people start using them. They're certainly not bad, but Normal Mode is such a face roll in terms of combat that you just didn't need them. And I don't think the mods are enough of an incentive when teams can get by just fine without them. I haven't even tested them because I haven't needed to care. Ultimately, I think the way loot was done in Master Mode does not incentivize me to run it more than once to get the challenge done for the week, for the title, and then maybe besides dumping all of my spoils. I really thought I was going to have more to say on this. I just don't. I'm not the most incentivized. I'll get the title. I'll go get a good Fatebringer. You know, I'll go dump my spoils. That'll probably be it. Maybe that's how they wanted people to run it. I don't know. And maybe if I didn't get completely shafted on my Titan this first week, getting no armor and wasting a bunch of spoils on garbage, I would feel a little bit different. But nothing about that experience said to me, hey, you know what I want to do? Run that one back. In concludatorium, gameplay was at the difficulty that I was expecting. I thought it was pretty good. The loot, I think, needs some improvement for the majority of the player base. If you only get weapon drops, you're pretty hosed. If I'm on Master Mode, I think I need to be guaranteed a couple pieces of armor. Maybe you do 1 weapon and 1 armor drop per encounter to make sure you don't get hosed. Time lost weapon drops, I feel like should be a thing outside of doing the challenge mode. I want to see maybe 2 per clear. I would be fine with having the challenges be for the title only, although I get the thought process to have the Uber gun come from the Uber challenge. But yeah, I think for the majority of the player base, it's maybe a little too stingy at this time. Wow, that was a long one. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Yeet!